So start by feeling the way that you're making contact with the floor now. Are there any parts of you that almost seem to be elevated? Are there any parts of you that are sinking? Is there anything that you particularly like in the feeling of the floor right now? And then notice as you move your attention around and along the back of you, does anything change in your perception? You might find sometimes that you've just noticed that the right side of your pelvis is kind of pressing, and then it changes. Or you might notice that your breathing is really in one part of you, and then that changes. Now notice the back of your head. See if you can get a sense of the weight of your skull. That skull that you carry around with you all day long. And notice when you put your attention on your breathing and you feel the weight of your skull, is there any relationship? Is there any influence of one on the other? And could you get curious about the way that you're breathing and see, is there a way that you could breathe that would somehow feel like it influences your head more? And then what about your arms? Is the way that you're breathing having any kind of influence on the way that you feel your arms? And how about your back, the curve of your back? Can you get curious, do a little bit of research and see if you could do any slight changes in the way that you're breathing that would actually somehow change the feeling around the curvature of your back? And your hips, the back of your pelvis? Is there a way to breathe that could actually influence the way that you feel your pelvis? Now, there's no biomechanic connection between your lungs and your legs, and yet it could be that there's a way you could breathe that could almost give you a sense that your breathing is moving down your legs to your feet. Maybe not. You're just curious, right? Is there a little bit more to the picture that I have of myself right now that I could just casually look at? And then take a few more moments and see what it feels like when you say, I'm going to breathe with all of me. Not in a forced way, not in a controlled way, but just with this kind of like gentle gaze at your whole self and the feeling of your whole self on the floor. Now bring your attention back to your head again and If you prefer, bend your knees and stand your feet. And remember, don't ever wait for me to give you a suggestion of how to be more comfortable. Keep checking in with yourself and say, oh, is there something I could do to be a little bit more comfortable so I can stay present in what's happening, not distracted by discomfort, right? And now, again, feel the weight of your head, but do a really gentle movement of rolling your head left and right. And see if you can get a sense of how the weight of your head is being moved across the floor. Does that change your breathing when you start rolling your head? What if you roll your head at half the speed that you're rolling it now? Is there any change there? Now, leave your head in the middle. And because I'm doing these 3-week series, I want to weave in for a moment what we've done the previous week, just so you can keep some element of continuity between the lessons. And if you weren't here, then you get a little dabble into what we did last week. So last week, we started looking at this very interesting, unusual kind of breathing, where you were doing a short, fast inhale, but not strong, gentle, short and fast, and then also a short and fast exhale. And what you might remember from last week, maybe you don't remember anything from last week, but what happened last week was that we started with your awareness up at the very top of your lung, right behind your collarbone. We started on one side, but for now you can start by thinking about both sides of your chest, just below your collarbones, and just to take a couple moments and see what it's like this week to do this short, gentle, quick inhalation, followed by a short, gentle, quick exhalation. And if it's helpful, you could put your hands on your chest below your collarbones. And what you might notice with the big brains in your hands, the big sensory organs of your hands, might actually help you feel this unique kind of movement. I always call it a puff. To me, it's like a little puff. You might feel a certain kind of puff of movement underneath your hands when you breathe in. You take your time, right? The moment you start forcing something to be other than how it is, the whole situation is changed. You just say, am I curious? Am I curious? Can I be curious? And it's likely you'll start doing something you're familiar with. That makes you a very normal human. And then you say, oh yeah, that's easy for me. That's the thing that I do. I'm curious if there's another way to do it. A short, comfortable breath in, but fast. And then a short, comfortable breath out. Right up underneath your collarbones, the very top of your lungs. And then take your hands down to the arc of your ribs in the front, on the right and the left side. And just play. Just be curious. See what's there. If you think about the bottom lobe of your lungs, and bringing your air in through your nose, going down your throat, going from the top of your lungs all the way down to the bottom of your lungs, and continue with that short, gentle inhalation, quick, and a quick exhalation. Now into the bottom of your ribs. You could have your finger tips, your finger pads right at your solar plexus, right where your abdomen starts after the bottom of your chest bone. And what's that like? Short, but not fast. You're not hurrying. Not rapid, right? Just short and quick. So your inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. But listening for the puff. See if you can just stay with it a little bit longer. Though, of course, if you need to stop, stop. If you can stay connected to your experience, then maybe you can start to pay attention again to the feeling of your contact with the floor. So that when you feel the puff with your hands, or maybe it's not quite a puff, but something under your hands in the front of you, well, what's happening in the back of you? And then take a rest, however it's comfortable for you to rest, and see what your natural, uncontrolled breathing feels like after having just done this little study. So it's not a technique. It's one way that you can access your feeling of your breathing. So you start to deepen your sense of yourself. Okay, now we're going to look at a new way that you can deepen your sense of yourself and your breathing. So if you're comfortable to be on your back, again, come on your back, have your knees bent, your feet standing. If you'd rather do it sitting, you can do it sitting. If you need to rest on your side and come back on your back, go back. You know, take care of yourself. You do what you got to do, right? Now, bring your attention back to the way that you're making contact with the floor. And the way that your natural, comfortable breathing feels, the way that it's moving. And again, if there's any kind of influence on your position on the floor, on your limbs, on your head, just from your natural breathing. Now, have your arms by your sides with your palms up. If you're sitting, you can have your hand in your lap with your palm up. And you're going to do a sort of a funny, interesting movement. Feel the way that your left arm is, and do a really simple movement of rotating your palm to face down, your left palm, yeah, and then rotate it back up again. Yeah. And do that a few times, several times. And as usual, see if you could find a way to reduce the effort. Maybe your hand can stay in contact with the floor, with your body the whole time. If it's at all awkward to have, if you're on your back, your arms on the floor, you could always have your arm on yourself somewhere, right? On a blanket. Just keep adjusting so that you're as comfortable as possible. And just see what that's like, that rotating of your left palm. And notice how you're breathing. Is there any relationship? Are you breathing at the same speed as the rotating of your palm? Are you breathing faster? Maybe slower? Okay, now rest with your palm up, and we'll call it a complete turn when your palm goes from how it is now to down to back to up. Okay, so just try that once. So it's just your left hand, and your left hand goes from your palm is up, and then it goes down, and then it goes up again. That's one turning, let's call it. Yeah. So now you're going to see if you can coordinate that with your inhale, so that as you have your palm starting up, your palm goes down, your palm goes up again. That's an inhale. And then you exhale however you like. So you can modulate the speed of the turning of your hand to match your breathing. Just as you breathe in, you rotate down, rotate back up again, and then breathe out. And notice the pace that you've chosen for yourself. And then add in your exhale, so that your inhale is one turning, meaning palm is up, palm is down, palm is up again. And then your exhale is one turning. Palm is up, palm is down, palm is up again. And of course, if you get confused, you lose track, you just stop, come back to it when you feel ready. It's actually quite hilarious, to be honest with you. When I first did this, I was like, what? That's so easy. What? And then I was like, are you kidding me? This is insane. What are we doing right now? So you might be like, what? What do you mean? That's totally normal and fine. Or you might be like, your brain is getting a little bit scrambled. So, I always say in these lessons, when people get like confused or challenged, I'm like, look, if it was easy, we wouldn't be doing it, right? It wouldn't be a study. So let yourself experience how this is for you. And of course, you can play with your own pacing, right? Now, see if you could find the pacing that you can maintain, right? So that instead of changing it, you keep it like a metronome. And if there's anything that feels uncomfortable that you don't like about it, ask yourself, is there something I could do that would be more comfortable? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to support my hand on something so that my hand stays in contact with the floor? You just check in with yourself. Okay, and then do take a break and take a rest. If you're on your back, maybe lengthen out your legs, bring your arms down, do what you got to do. But as you're resting and you come back to your natural breathing, feel how it is. Because remember, this is just the container. This is the place that we come and do the funny thing to enhance our ability when we're out in the world in relationship with our environment, with other people. We get better at noticing. Okay, and then come back on your back. Legs are long if you want, knees are bent, feet are standing, sitting if you prefer, resting if you need to rest. Noticing if you're challenged, notice if you get tired or drowsy, right? It's all part of the process. Now, we're going to add to this rotation of your palm. So it's still one full rotation. Your palm is up, and then your palm is down, and then your palm is up again. Except now you're going to see what happens if you turn it into a four-part breathing, which you might have done in four-part breathing in other, maybe with me in Feldenkrais or in other scenarios. So try not to get attached to it as a technique and just keep listening for the feeling, so that now as you're breathing in, your palm starts up, it rotates down and goes back up again. You keep your breath in as you rotate your palm down and back up again. You exhale as you rotate your palm down and back up again. Keep your breath out as you rotate down and come back up again. And then you start again. And you see if you can maintain a certain kind of rhythm for yourself. It's your own rhythm. You get to choose. You don't have to keep up with yourself. But you see, what if it were consistent? That your in-breath, retention, exhale, and retention are all the same speed. Could you change the tempo? What if you were to go a little bit slower? So still each of the 4 parts is the same speed, but the time that it takes you to rotate your hand down and back up again is slower. Is there a certain moment that you find you keep consistently stopping or speeding up? So that even in your attention, you're still going with the rotating down and rotating back up, right? And what's wild is that literally your brain is maintaining a steady rhythm with your hand as you're retaining a steady rhythm with your breathing. And so if you feel a resistance, notice where you get interrupted. And then have a little rest. And if you're on your back, notice how your 2 arms feel and how your back feels, what your contact is with the floor. If you're sitting, you want to rest on your back, by all means. And pay attention to if there starts to be any kind of change in the way that you experience your natural, uncontrolled breathing. Now, this next part, you'll be on your front side. You'll be laying down on your front. But again, if you prefer to be sitting, then you can do that. You could also try this on your side, laying on your side, and see what works. So the initial position is on your front side with your right cheek down on the floor. And you could either have your head on your left hand or on the floor. If that's uncomfortable, you could bend up your left knee if it's not nice to be on your front side. And then have your right arm slightly straighter than your left, but have it in a position that there's no strain in your arm. Your right palm is face down. When I was playing with this last night, I started to get some tingles, so I had to keep adjusting where my arm was, right? So you might need to adjust it. But essentially, you want your right palm flat down in a way that you can be comfortable. And first, just start by noticing what your contact is like with the floor in this position. And think about the tempo that you had established for the rotating of your hand when you were on your back. And without doing any movement, see what that tempo feels like now just in your casual, comfortable breathing. Now that you're on your front side, do you find that your breathing is different from your collarbones to the bottom of your rib cage? Is the distribution of movement different? Do you feel your back moving? Now bring your attention to your right hand and do a gentle, comfortable movement of lifting your pointer finger, your index finger, away from the floor. Only your index finger. Lift it away like you wanted to say, excuse me. So you just lift only your pointer finger and bring it back down. And that in itself might be kind of a hilarious challenge. Some of you might find your fingers like to work as a hand pack. So lift your one finger. Yeah, exactly. You might need to change how your arm is, right? And it might need to be more up alongside your head. And just lightly and gently lift and lower just your index finger. You can even tap it lightly. It can make a little sound, just a little tapping of your index finger. Make sure you're not challenging your shoulder, right? There's enough to pay attention to. So see that your shoulder's in a place that accommodates the movement of your finger. Because believe it or not, if your shoulder's compromised, it makes moving your hand more difficult. So do some research. Don't take my word for it. What's the difference? What's the difference of if your hand is in one position versus the opposite, right? If your arm is up alongside your head, feel what it's like to lift just your index finger versus if your hand is down by your waist or your thigh. What's it like to move your index finger? If your arm is bent or if your arm is straight. And maybe you can't tell. It feels the same everywhere. Okay, so then you've done your research. It feels the same everywhere. Great. So now start to lift and lower just your middle finger and make a little tap. A little tap. Maybe like you're impatiently waiting for someone. Tap, tap, tap. And then you're patiently waiting for someone. So tap, tap. Yeah. And then with your ring finger, could you lift your ring finger without the other guys coming? And if not, don't force it, right? You just do what you can do. And then the pinky finger, tap that guy. And then start back at your index finger and tap your index, and then tap your middle, and then tap the ring, and then tap the pinky, and then go back to the index. And how are you breathing as you're doing this? Okay, now just pause for a second, give your brain a quick rinse. And go back to the sequential tapping, first the index, then the middle, and then the fourth, and then the fifth finger. But this time, when you do the first finger, you breathe in. And when you do the second finger, you breathe out. And when you do the third finger, you breathe in. And the fourth finger, you breathe out. And then you go back to the first finger as you breathe in. And again, you go at your pace that matches your breathing. And if you're finding that this movement of your fingers and your hands is quite easy for you, then you could maybe invite a little bit more of a lightness so that it's almost like a wave. And if it's already like, oh, it's sort of complicated to differentiate your fingers, you just keep going as you're going and see where you can smooth out the edges of the movement, making the movement smaller and more delicate with your breathing. One finger, one half of the breath cycle. And those of you that are more dexterous in this way, that it doesn't give you any sort of complication to move your fingers, in the wave variation, you might find that as one finger is coming down, the next finger is lifting up. And again, it's not a better variation, it's just a different variation. So you stay with the variation that doesn't challenge you. Stay with the variation that you can stay connected to the feeling that you get and the way that your breathing is. And if you're not resting already, take a rest. Maybe come onto your back for a moment and see what your contact with the floor is like. Does this little exploration with your fingers change anything about the way that you feel connected to the ground? Come back one more time onto your front side, same situation, again, unless that's uncomfortable in any way, and then change it. Still working with your right hand, still with your right palm down. Maybe your right palm is somewhere alongside your head or just above your head, unless for some reason that doesn't work for you. Maybe you have your left knee bent up to the left. Your face is looking to the left. Now, this time, come back to the idea of 4-part breathing, right? So 4-part breathing is, or 4 corners breathing, sometimes it's referred to as, is essentially when you create a rhythm that your inhale and your exhale and the pauses are all the same length. I was actually having a hard time sleeping last night, and I did this, and it knocked me out. So that also could be a nice tool if any of you have trouble sleeping. I think it just bores you senseless, so that's why you fall asleep. But anyway, so now when you're lifting your index finger, that's your inhale, lifting it and lowering it. Your middle finger is the pause, lifting and lowering. Your third finger is the breath out, lifting and lowering. And then your baby finger, your pinky finger, is keeping the breath out, lift and lower. Go back to your index finger. Breathe in as you lift and lower. You choose how fast that is or how slow it is. Keep the breath in as you lift and lower your second finger. Let your breath come out as you lift and lower your fourth finger. And keep the breath out when you lift and lower your baby finger. Notice if you're trying to coordinate your breathing with your fingers or your fingers with your breathing. Just keep checking that you're doing what you think you're doing, and that you're maintaining a consistent rhythm. Right? Notice, I know for myself, I'll get lost. Suddenly I'll get lost in a retention and I'll be like, oops, wait a second, right? So it might be different. You might really find, oh my God, I love the inhale. I inhale forever, but then exhale is like not even there, right? So you just see what it's like for you. And that somehow your breathing is tethered to the sensation of the lifting and lowering of each of your fingers. You drift away, see what it's like to come back. Oh, yeah, let me come back and use my attention in this unique way again. What's it like for me to pay attention in this way? Is there a way to pay attention to a detail without straining? And if you're able to do so comfortably, lengthen yourself out so your legs are long, your arms are by your sides, and you have this reference, this way of looking into the mirror of your sensation, the feeling of yourself on the floor. My favorite things about this practice is that we literally use curiosity as a tool. In a way, you could say that curiosity is the opposite of a story. A story confirms how things are. And curiosity keeps you open to possibilities. Now, just a couple times, go back to where you started with the rotating of your left arm and see how that feels now. Just do it a few times with the 4-part breathing so that as you're breathing in, you rotate your left palm down and then back up again. You pause as you rotate it down and back up again. You breathe out as you rotate it down and back up again. And you keep the breath out as you rotate it down and back up again. And if you had found it awkward or challenging before, notice if your experience of doing this is different at all now. Okay, now leave your left arm quiet and do it with your right arm. What's different? And then do it with both of your arms at the same time. And notice if there's an interference, right? If you get stuck somewhere. It's interesting. Where do you get stuck? Is it the movement speaking to your breathing, or is it your breathing speaking to the movement? And then leave that and see what your natural breathing's like. And notice again now, just breathing comfortably without any kind of control, the way that you sense a connection between your breathing and your head. Is there any sense of connection there at all? Or how about your arms? Is there any sense of connection between the movement and the feeling of your breathing and the feeling of your arms? Or how about your back or your pelvis? Could you even imagine a connection from your breathing down into your legs? Now, to end with here, indulge me for a moment and imagine yourself moving in your favorite way. And see if you can imagine yourself breathing as you're doing it. And could you play with it in your imagination so that you change the way that you're breathing as you're doing your favorite movement? Play with the option of coordinating so your movement and your breathing are an expression of one another or not. Can you imagine the difference in the feeling? And then finally, can you imagine doing this movement while you're holding your breath? Can you imagine how that would feel? Can you recognize the difference? Holding your breath on the inhale, or maybe holding your breath after an exhale. And then just bring yourself right back here onto the floor and the feeling of the contact that you're making with the floor right now. And again, just this idea that there's a relationship at each part of your respiratory cycle that has an influence on how you are in resting and posture and movement and space. And then, rest a bit and maybe take a few more minutes to slowly sit up, stand up, walk around, and pay attention. Play a bit with how your breathing is in your standing and in your walking.